All right. Looks like won the die roll. This hand though is not going to be a keep. We're going to be getting rid of this one as soon as possible. This hand looking pretty bad. This reminded me of round 1, not the 2 previous rounds. We were drawn pretty well 2 previous rounds, but this we're going to 5. We're going to 5. This hand's a keep. I'm going to bottom this because I'm just going to be casting Stirrings here on 1. I think it's important, and it's not like keeping that's that exciting for us. I think it's important to take Eldrazi Temple over threats here because I can find... There's a lot of threats in my deck, and hopefully we can find one with Ancient Stirrings. We're more likely to find an additional threat than we are an additional Temple, and I think it's important for us not to be too terribly slow. Plus, we're land light anyway. So I think it's just definitely Temple. Looks like burn, perhaps. Another land. Not really interested in just casting Bearer here. We'll take Thought Knot over another land. Play Eldrazi Temple and say go. Yeah, definitely burn. In case there was any doubt from the start. I mean, especially off of Wooded Foothills, it's like already 99.9% burn. But once you get Lava Spiked, you know, you could be playing against some like weird, if someone's like Sacred Foundry, Grim Lavamancer, you could be playing against something weird. But you're still 90% plus burn. Once the Lava Spike comes down, the mystery is erased. If there was any left, it is then erased. I'm definitely going to name Eldrazi here so I don't have to spend black if and when we get to cast a Sparrow of Silence. Thought Knot Seer is pretty great this turn. Opponent's hand obviously loaded considering they missed their land drop. I think it's pretty easy to take Bolt here and then just, you know, ask our opponent to maybe not draw a land for a couple turns. If they wait like, you know, one or 2 turns, that might give us the window we need to be able to win this game. Looks like we're gonna Bearer of Silence here in case our opponent drew Lightning Bolt. I think I'd be okay if, you know what, I probably wouldn't, but if they Shard Volleyed and blocked, I think I'd be okay with that, but probably just don't give my opponent the option if they decide that's what's the right thing for them to do. So we'll go ahead and cast this. Looks like they are going to activate it. Actually, I guess that gives them the opportunity to kill the Bearer of Silence. No, that would be fine, right? At least it gained us 2 life and still killed their... still killed their creature. Rather than pay 1 life and killed their creature and kept this in our hand. Pay for the ability, yes please. They opted not to use their Lavamancer and bolt me. Yeah, I suppose that makes sense since they're not really choked on burn as much as they are choked on mana. So if they did draw a bolt off the top, then I suppose it makes sense for them to do that instead. All right, opponent missed land drop, and they decided that that's gonna be it. So don't really have a lot for this matchup, but I think it's a reasonable matchup for us already. Thoughtseize is a little bit better post board against burn. Excuse me. We do have to worry about things like Path, Deflecting Palm. These aren't huge deals for us, but they're things that our opponent might be interested in bringing against us that we don't necessarily want to happen to us, and we really don't have a lot that we're interested in otherwise. I kind of, you know, I obviously understand the sort of dissonance in bringing in a spell that's just going to cause us to lose life and trade with a card, but I think post board against this deck, it's actually worth it. Bearer of Silence, I'm not particularly excited about either. Endbringer is definitely something that can and probably should get cut at least 1. in this matchup, definitely want all my oozes, stirrings, birds, pushes. I like veils, and I definitely want all the reshapers. So these are the sort of cards I would consider cutting. I guess I would kind of consider bringing in Slaughter Pact here. Again, there's just really not a lot I love in our board. Slaughter Pact does have the unique advantage again of being like, well, we're a little bit, especially on the draw, where like maybe there's a turn where we need to kill something but also want to commit to the board, especially if we have like a bird turn. But we're basically in this matchup never going to Slaughter Pact depending on a bird to pay, since it's just against burn. It's just so incredibly unlikely that they're unable to kill the bird. That's too high of a risk. So at that point, we're talking about like Slaughter Pacting on our turn 3 while also paying a threat, which is not terribly likely unless they like draw and play Eidolon. So I'm not sure Slaughter Pact's going to do a lot for us either. These cards are probably still better than Bearer of Silence and Endbringer, though. Bearer of Silence was okay that game, but I think that's kind of unique. Maybe I'm supposed to keep him. It just can't block. Like, if I could play it on 2 and just have it be a 2/1, I'd be a lot more excited about it. But the fact that it also just can't block is pretty discouraging. I'm not a huge fan of the card. Like, it definitely has been okay for us today, but I feel like the okay situations we've had today are basically the ceiling for the card, and there's certainly many worse spots for it. So I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll talk about this a little more in the wrap-up, but it would be kind of nice to perhaps consider changing the shell a little bit to support something like Wasteland Strangler instead. We already do have Thought-Knot Seer and Ooze, so that might even be enough to support a couple Wasteland Strangler. Probably not. You probably would need more ways to exile things, but maybe there's a shell there. Again, Bird not long for this world in this matchup most of the time, but that doesn't mean we're not keeping this hand. It could live, in theory, first of all. And second of all, if they don't have Searing Blaze, killing Bird is still kind of frustrating for our opponent. Searing Blaze or Lavamancer, I suppose. But outside of that, we're okay. Like, they're really not going to want to Rift Bolt it. I'm happy to use Cavern here on Bird after... rather, not even after drawing Twilight Mire, just all the time in this spot, considering that we don't need colored mana for any creatures other than Bird and Ooze anyway, and having Eldrazi be uncounterable in this matchup is not relevant. So, opponent does indeed Rift Bolt the Bird, which, again, we can only be so unhappy about. I'm going to effectively take 4 from this Eidolon. We have this sort of weird situation where, like, I'd like for my opponent to take more damage off their own Eidolon, but if they Boros Charmed to save their Eidolon, would I be sad? No, not really. Since I have this Slaughter Pact, I think we'd actually be okay with that. So, unfortunately, I do have to shock here. I'm taking the 2 damage either way, but it's important to be mana efficient. Since I'm not doing anything with my turn otherwise, the next turn I'd like to actually be casting something. If I'm fortunate enough to draw Eldrazi Temple, I would cast the Thought-Knot Seer, of course, but otherwise, we're just going to be casting a Matter Reshaper, which is fine. Hopefully they have additional creatures in their hand. Make that a little better. Spike. Eidolon. So this is where the Slaughter Pact does look pretty good. This is the situation that we did describe, where like I want to commit to the board, but also need to deal with this Eidolon first. I guess I don't need to deal with this Eidolon. Like, I could just play the Matter Reshaper and it'd probably be fine, but I don't want to take damage off of the Matter Reshaper as well, so I'm happy to pact here, especially since I'm not guaranteed to be able to do anything with my mana next turn anyway. So we will go ahead and do that. Molten Rain, good game. Sure. I guess that makes sense for my opponent to have post board, but I don't think it's worth playing around there. Looks like we were going to draw lands, so maybe if I just cast Matter Reshaper And this is obviously some hindsight, of course. But maybe I'm supposed to just cast Matter Reshaper. Maybe I am supposed to play around Molten Rain. Obviously, it's not something that I brought up. It's not something that was in the forefront of my mind, of course. But maybe it should have been. Obviously, it's not like unusual for my opponent to have such a thing. Yeah. That said, maybe with the knowledge that Molten Rains are in, maybe I should just definitely not have Slaughter Pact, and instead have something like Bearer Silence, Endbringer, or Maelstrom Pulse, or some combination of those. Obviously, they're going to be a little better on the play, and I can try to play around the potential of Molten Rain in the future. I don't want to side them out just because I got bit, right? I want to side them out if they're incorrect to be here. Yeah, I mean, I could see, like, bringing back in an Endbringer and a Bearer of Silence, maybe. It's not like I'm that light on removal. I don't have a ton, but it's also not like I need to kill their guys most of the time. Like, especially on the play, I'm going to be playing large threats pretty often. So I guess I am less interested in those, especially on the play and with the knowledge of Molten Rain lingering. Yeah, this is not a keep. This is indeed a keep. So is my bird more likely to live on one than for me to draw another Eldrazi Temple? I think the answer is yes. I'm going to get Forest here. Like, my opponent has to have Lightning Bolt. I doubt they're interested in Shard Volley on turn 1, sacking a land and killing my bird. Goblin Guide, sure. Ancient Stirrings on top. So we'll play a turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer. Always exciting stuff. Another one-lander for my opponent. They did indeed have Bolt. But it's just so painful for them to make that play. So, looks like we take Bolt here. If they draw land, the potential to block and then get Searing Blazed is pretty bad for me, but I just gotta choke them on mana again, I guess. I mean, they have all these ones this time, but then I just can't block. I mean, block and get bolted is a lot less bad than block and get Searing Blazed. It's definitely Bolt or Searing Blaze. It's just kind of close. Like, obviously, if my opponent doesn't draw a land in the next couple turns... The problem is that Thought-Knot Seer is like my only threat, and the trigger could really... Yeah, I'm just going to take the Bolt and hope that they miss a land drop for like maybe one turn. Alright, they suspend a Rift Bolt. I accidentally opened their graveyard here. Let's put that back. They suspend a Rift Bolt. And don't get us in combat here. We drew an Endbringer. Which is not terrible, but not as good as a Smasher would have been. But we can't be that greedy. We just can't be that greedy. Speaking of Smasher, there's one, but I think at this point I'm supposed to take Reshaper. I'm going to be casting Endbringer next turn anyway, and it's nice to play Reshaper so I have a good blocker for Goblin Guide, and I get to attack with Thought-Knot this turn. That might be incorrect. Might be just way better to do it the other way, but... I guess I should have attacked... Well, they already knew about the Reshaper anyway, but... I guess the other problem with the Reshaper is that it leaves Goblin Guide back here, but then just trades with it when it wants to attack next turn. Spend another Rift Bolt. Man, my opponent missed again. I'm probably actively disinterested from casting this Thoughtseize. I guess I don't have enough mana to cast it and the Endbringer anyway, so... If the deal wasn't sealed before, it is now. But it does just take it. And then we throw down our friend Endbringer. You know, I guess we could actually lose our Endbringer if they target it with Rift Bolt and then blaze us off a land, but doesn't that still put us in like a pretty commanding spot? Opponent now at 6, we're at 11, and they have Goblin Guide to our attack. Yeah, I mean, I just attack with both. And then have Thought-Knot, potentially Thoughtseize. Thought-Knot was a great draw, obviously. Opponent makes a good block there. It's better not to give me the Mana Reshaper trigger at that point. Okay. They scoop them up from there. And I'll see you in the final round in just a moment.